Hello and welcome to another Flightgear tutorial. Today I want to simulate a flight that took place in April of 2010, and it was the infamous flight it was a Tupolev 154 of the Polish Air Force, carrying amongst other passengers the Polish president from Warsaw to the military air base of Smolensk to take part in historical ceremony. And this flight ended in a fatal plane crash right before the runway of Smolensk. So there were 96 casualties altogether, among them the Polish president. And what I do not want to do is to speculate about political implications or about conspiracy theories, but I want to shed a light on the avionics of this flight. What was it like for the pilots to do this approach in bad weather conditions, so with very low visibility, and with the landing systems that were available on their airplane, and especially on this military airfield of Smolensk. It is, to be precise, Smolensk North. So I downloaded a report from the internet. It's a PDF file about this, about the final moments of the flight. And here in this chart, you can see the vertical and horizontal flight chart. You can see here on the left, this is the runway. And unfortunately, there is an uphill slope before the runway, and as you can see here, what was taken from the flight recorders, the plane descended too fast while they were on their glide path, and then they were already below ground level and tried to get up again, but it was too late. They already touched the tips of the trees here and finally crashed before the runway. And here in this chart you can see that the plane was also not completely aligned with the runway. It was deviated a little bit to the left, so the only orientation that you got here, there is no ILS, there is no VOR, there are just two NDBs east of the runway. There's an inner and an outer NDB, so you have to use your NDB radio receiver in that plane, but it doesn't give you distance information, and of course it is much more difficult to do the navigation and also the landing maneuver with the ADF receiver instead of using a VOR or even an ILS. So your main source of information is in fact the ATC, so the air traffic controller in Smolensk, giving you specific instructions about your heading, your speed, and also your sink rate. And that makes the whole thing a real challenge even under good weather conditions. And as it was reported from that flight, the weather conditions were far from good, so visibility was very low, and that's something we want to try to simulate today. So let's jump into the cockpit. This is what the cockpit of the Tupolev 154 looks from the inside, and I paused the simulation, so we're in mid-flight. Let's have a look at the map. So we're already, let's say, 2/3 of the flight we have already passed. There is the VOR of Vitebsk, Uniform Mike Double India, and we are currently heading for this VOR. So I switched the autopilot of the Tupolev to VOR navigation. We are heading for VOR number 1, and this is I entered the frequency of Vitebsk. And there's also it's a VOR DME, and it gives us also the distance. So we're approaching this. We're now 86 kilometers out. Note that this is in metric system, in kilometers, not in miles. So your altimeter shows your altitude in feet, as you're maybe used to from Airbus and Boeing models, But this is kilometers, the DME distance, and also the speedometer shows you your speed not in knots but in kilometers per hour. So these are something around 550 kilometers per hour. When you activate your head-up display, pressing the H button on your keyboard, it shows you we got an airspeed of 290 knots, so that's a normal, fairly normal airspeed on your cruising flight level. We are now on 31,000 feet, flight level 310. Okay. So what is the plan for today? We will be heading for this VOR. We will be crossing the VOR and then do a little turn to the right to fly eastbound, but not exactly eastbound. We will use the runway orientation of Smolensk North to fly downwind here. Let's have a look at these two runways. So the city of Smolensk is here in the middle of those two airfields, and this is the airfield that we're aiming for, X-ray Uniform Bravo Sierra, with those two NDBs that you've seen in the chart. So the inner NDB, the outer NDB, I already entered the kilohertz frequencies of these two NDBs into our radio stack. And here you can see, activating the data information, you can see the runway orientation is either 77 or adding 180 degrees, 257 degrees. So when we do our turn over the VOR of Vitebsk, we will not be turning to 90 degrees, but to 77 degrees, so that we're flying exactly parallel to this runway orientation, but mostly eastbound. And we will be following that path for another 150 kilometers. Then we will be east of the runway of Smolensk North, and then we will turn base, turning another 90 degrees to the right, and shortly after turning another 90 degrees to the right to turn final for those two NDBs and for the runway of Smolensk North. So one more thing which is essential for our today's simulation is what we see now is the live weather condition here over, we are now over Belarus. So you see the visibility and weather is very good, and we're going to change that. We want to simulate the weather conditions on the from the 10th of April of 2010. And as the report said, the weather conditions, especially the visibility, was deteriorating rapidly. So there were other planes touching down in Smolensk and reporting that the touchdown was getting more and more difficult, more and more dangerous. So let's see if we can do a successful touchdown attempt. And if we can't, if at least we can do a successful go-round without crashing into the forest. So we go for the environment here, weather, and instead of the live data, which shows us some sunny weather conditions, we're going to change for the Cat 1 minimum. Let's see what it says. Cat 1 minimum. If you just got your IFR rating, this is what you are allowed to do. But can you? Well, we shall see about that. So we're going to activate that. This sudden jump in air pressure, it always confuses the autopilot here, so we have to stabilize the plane. There was now this very abrupt shift in air pressure, which makes the plane go for a sudden jump, and now we have to stabilize the plane again. So that's not the plane's or the pilot's fault, but it's the fault, my fault, because I tweaked the simulation in mid-flight. But as we are high enough here in our cruising altitude, it should not be too much of a problem to stabilize the plane. So the heading is still okay. We are climbing. We do not want to climb. We want to stay on our cruising flight level. In fact, we want to start our sinking maneuver. Okay, let's turn to 77 degrees. First we will just keep the current heading, and we will use this white arrow for orientation, 77. And when we're below 10 kilometers out from the VOR, we will do our right turn to be heading for 77, which is parallel to the runway orientation of Smolensk. Okay, now let's do the turn. We make the plane follow the heading bug instead of just the wing leveler. Now we shall reduce the speed from 550 to 450 kilometers per hour. A little bit less even. Okay. And we will start our descent so that we can we are down to something around 11,000 feet when we are again 150 kilometers out from the Vitebsk VOR DME. So there's nothing like flight level change button here, as you're maybe used to from Boeing models. Okay, from time to time I got this problem here with the autopilot, that it will jam, that it won't allow any pitch down maneuver. So I will simply cut off the autopilot, and I will do this now manually. I'll pitch down ever so slightly, trying to keep the wings leveled with a decent sink rate, not more than 10 here in this instrument. Otherwise we would pick up too much speed again. Normally the Tupolev 154 is well mannered, so you can do this maneuver also by hand. Okay, let's rearm the autopilot. Okay. Let's roll a little bit to the left. Outside. Now we're rolling to the right. Let's not do that. Okay, I will try to activate the autopilot again. And again, it won't let me pitch down. There's a very strange thing. It happened to me several times. I will try to use the air brakes instead now, using the K button on my keyboard. That should help us initiate the sinking maneuver. Okay. Good enough for the time being. And what you can already see here, these are the two needles for the two heading for the two non-directional beacons. So the yellow, the single arrow, is pointing to the inner NDB, and this white double arrow is pointing to the outer NDB. But as we are far out from Smolensk, so they are both still completely aligned. They should separate once we're getting close to Smolensk. So we will use these two arrows as our main source of information for the final navigation to the runway. Okay, now the sink rate is okay, speed is okay. Now we have to sink at least to 11,000 feet. Reduce the speed even more to be below the speed limit of 250 knots, below 10,000 feet. And we will simply keep the standard air pressure of 29.92 inches for the landing approach. Okay, let's speed things up a little bit, not to bore you. We will compress time until we're close to 150 kilometers out. And we should be passing those two NDBs, which are very close to the Smolensk runway. We should be passing them on their northern side. So these needles, they should be moving here from the upper right to the upper left side of the instrument. Let's check again. Yes, Cat 1 minimum. So there should be quite poor visibility on short final. Okay. We will keep our flight level once we're at 11,000 feet. Lower the sync rate and hold. This H here is for altitude hold. Let's keep this altitude for a moment. Okay. So I was all wrong. The needle shouldn't move from the upper right to the upper left, but from the upper right to the lower right here. Now the runway is the Smolensk runway, and the NDBs, they are in a 90 degrees angle to our right side. So we're now about to pass the runway. I don't think that we are able to see it. If we look to the right, somewhere in the distance there should be this Smolensk runway while we're flying downwind now. Okay, and let's continue our descent. Let's see. Now it reacts again. Quite poorly, but okay. Let's use the air brakes again. Let's reduce speed even more to 400. More air brakes. Okay, we will descend to 5,000 feet. So this is not a mountainous area, so we can go that low without risking colliding with any mountains. And once we're below 10,000 feet, we can activate the headlights. Let's compress time again, this time at 2 times compression. So our point of orientation is once we're 150 kilometers out from the Vitebsk we should be far enough east to turn base. Now we're below 10,000 feet, so let's activate the headlights plane. Okay. Okay. Enough of time compression. The rest we will do in real time. So we have to take care, once we are down to 5,000 feet, we have to stop our descent. Let's not miss this, because in this plane you don't have the luxury of pre-selecting a target altitude and then pressing a button like flight level change, like in a Boeing. At least in this version of the model, it does not exist, so you always have to pay good attention to your altimeter. You can only just pitch up and down and wait until you reach your targeted altitude, and then level the plane manually pressing the H button here. So we will finish our descent regardless if we are already across this 150 kilometers boundary, because this has priority. Get your altitude management right first and then take care of the heading. Okay, we can turn 90 degrees. First level the wings. Turn 90 degrees to the right. Get ready to level the plane. Keep the altitude. Deactivate the air brakes. And now we turn base. So I changed from wing leveler to following the heading bug. So from turning mostly to the east, we're now turning south. And now we have to pay good attention to our ADF radio here, pointing to the NDBs. So when those two arrows here point to 90 degrees to the right, then it means we have to turn final. Even a little bit before, because you need a little radius for that final curve when you turn final. So when these two arrows are pointing almost to 90 degrees, maybe 80 degrees, 85 degrees, then you turn your plane to the right to turn final, and then you do some fine tuning, meaning you have to go for the runway orientation, which is 257. Now we're here on the back course. So we will adjust here. So 257 is the other direction of the runway orientation. And this is what we will use for orientation for our landing maneuver. We have to get the glide path right completely manually. There's no assistance from any ILS system on the ground. So we have to maintain the correct sink rate ourselves. Always make sure that you're not sinking too fast here. Okay, I will go for flaps 1. And slow down a little more. Not using air brakes at the moment. I will only use them if I have to. Keep a good look at the ADF radio. It's not yet time to turn final. When we look at the map, this is what it looks like. Here. These two NDBs we will use for orientation, and we're now heading base in a 90 degrees angle towards the runway orientation. Okay, enough of cheating with the online map. Let's try to get this done without cheating with this computer map. Because the pilots, they also didn't have the luxury of using such a map or a GPS system or even ILS or VOR. So it was very, very old school what they had to do. And ultimately, as you can read in the news, they failed doing that. Let's see if that was an easy or in fact a suicide maneuver, what they tried to do under poor visibility conditions. So as we got no better data, we just keep standard air pressure for the rest of the flight. Okay, let's use the heading bug again. No, we will keep the wings leveled. Let's turn back again. Like this. Okay. Did the same mistake again. First, level the wings, and now that the heading bug is free, it's detached now from our from the maneuvering of the plane. We can turn it 90 degrees to the right, and just wait a little more, and now we should be good to go to turn final. So be turning to the right for the heading bug. We should be something like 20 miles out, so that's the normal start of the glide path for the landing approach. So we have to start our descent with a decent sink rate. So let's try to pitch down. That doesn't work again. So we use air brakes again. Okay. That's a decent sink rate. Always keep an eye on your vertical speedometer here, so that you don't have too much of a sink rate. Otherwise you will get a ground proximity warning. At least you should. So that looks pretty solid here. So we are now, this is the runway orientation 257, and we are more or less heading for those NDBs. We have to turn a little bit more to the left. So, and you can see this white arrow, this is always our reference orientation. This is course 257, and now we're turning to the left even more to cross the glide path. We are now still north of the glide path. We have to go south to the extension of the runway orientation, and then turn to the right again, so that we're heading exactly 257 and that the two NDBs are straight ahead. Okay, we have to stop the descent at least at 2000 feet. And there comes this extra challenge, this ascending slope directly, this very unfortunate slope before the runway starts. This is really a very, very tricky geographical profile in Smolensk. From my understanding, this airport is a good weather landing airport only, unless you have been doing hundreds of landing maneuvers there already. Okay, as we got no distance information, this distance information doesn't help us. It gives us the distance to Vitebsk, but that's irrelevant now. So the only reference point for orientation, if we are far away from, if we are very close to the runway, is these two needles. The first needle, this white double arrow, it should turn to a back course once we have passed the outer NDB. So as long as both arrows are pointing straight ahead. Okay, let's stop the descent. And let's... Okay, at least the plane gives us a warning. That's good. We're going for flaps 2. And let's turn to the right again. As we got no visual of the runway, yeah, Now it's really foggy. That's what we expected. Now we are very low. Let's go a little higher. Turn to the left. Go for those NDBs here. Okay. Full flaps. Lower the speed. No air brakes. And once we are passing the outer NDB, we will lower the gear. Okay, 2000. It's really crawling across the floor here. That's, you see, now these needles are parting. But more important is the yellow needle for us. This is the inner NDB. I will now lower the gear. I'll be too fast. Lower flaps. We are way too fast. Let's try to slow down. A little more than 300. Okay. I will now deactivate the autopilot. And I will try to be aiming for the yellow, for this yellow needle. Keep the altimeter in your view. Speed is sort of okay. Let's not climb, let's not sink. Level the wings. Go straight ahead. I can see a little bit of the ground. Aim for that NDB. This is the middle marker. Let's turn more to the left. Okay, somewhere here should be the runway. There's the runway. Here, to the right you can see the runway. We missed it. Okay. Time to go around. Make sure you got a positive climb. We're still sinking, that's not good. Retract the gear. Go to flaps 2. As you can see, just now it's the middle marker again on the western side of the Smolensk airport. So as you can see, we did not successfully make it. At least we got the runway inside, but far to the right of us, so we didn't make it. Okay. So this is basically it for today. So from my subjective point of view, it is close to impossible really doing a safe touchdown under these weather conditions with these circumstances. The best you can do is a successful go around, not to jeopardize the whole plane and your passengers. So this is it for today. I hope it gave you a little impression what it is like to try a landing approach on Smolensk North Military Airbase with a Tupolev 154 with poor visibility. Thanks for watching and see you again next time. Goodbye.